In this video, I'll show you how to use XML serialization. First, I'll create a class that's capable of being serialized, and then I'll take advantage of the XML serializer object to write the contents of the object out to a file. Finally, I'll take the contents of the file and read it back into a new instance of our object. First thing I'll do is create a new project. I'll just create a C# console application. We'll call it serialization. Click on OK. Go ahead and delete this out. We need to add using system directive and using system.xml.serialization. Now I'll just create a public class, and we'll call this driver. And we need a static void method, main. And now what I need to do is create a class that can be serialized. For this example, I'll just create a car class. And the most important thing is we need to add an attribute called serializable. Now this is pretty neat. If you just add that simple little attribute, .NET just kind of takes care of the rest of it for you. So I'll add a couple of properties and a method or two, and we'll go ahead and serialize it, and then I'll show you what the output looks like. So let's create, how about an integer, and we'll call it horsepower. And we'll just initialize it with 0 for now. Could probably use a couple of strings. Make. Leave that blank. And model. And maybe a year. I'll go ahead and create a constructor. Just a default one. Yeah. Just pick some arbitrary things here. And specify a year. Again. Now let me go ahead and I'll turn one of these into a public property. So let's make the year a public property. So I'll make this private, and then create the property version. So make that a lowercase. I need to come down here and change this to a lowercase year. And let's make this read-only. So we'll just do a get. And I want to go ahead and create a method, just so we can see what happens when you serialize, how these different attributes of the class are handled. So we'll just do a public string, and we'll call it get model. Just return this dot model. Okay, now we've got a class that can be serialized, and it's got some different fields, a property and a method. So now what we need to do is come up to this driver application and actually write this thing out to a file. So I'll create an instance of it, and then I'll write it out to a file. So the first thing I need to do is create an instance of the XML serializer object. And this takes a type that represents the actual kind of object that we're going to be serializing out to a file. So I'll use the type of operator, and car. So I'm just telling this constructor that it can expect an instance of a car class. Now I need to create a new text writer instance. Oops. Looks like I'm going to need to include a reference to the system.io namespace. And we'll just pass in a string variable file name. Just call our file name car.xml. And let me go ahead and add this using system.io. Now all we need to do is call the serialize method on the XML serializer object. So I just need to pass in my text writer and then of course an instance of the car. So I'll just do that. Now we need to come up here and let me create an instance of the car class. Now I'll build and run this. And then we can take a look at the output. So let me just browse to the directory that has the file in it, and you see, just by default, it wrote out to the same place that the executable was going to be. So we'll just open this up with Notepad. You see that what we get is well-formed XML, and it's just got values for all the fields in there. We specified by default 230 horsepower, a make of nothing, and a model of foo. And that's exactly what got wrote out to this file. Look at our constructor here. Those are the values we have. Now if I wanted to create a new instance of the car method, I could deserialize it, so I could basically reconstitute that stuff that I put in the XML file and create a new instance with the values that are in that XML file. So I can illustrate that now. So the first thing I probably want to do is go ahead and close the text writer. That way we won't have a hold of the file we're trying to read from. And I'm going to need to create an instance of the text reader class. And we'll pass in the file name here as well. And I'm going to reuse the XML serializer object that I used earlier. And I need to create a new a new car object. Call it car2. And we're going to have to cast this to type car because deserialize will return an object. So I need to access.deserialize this time. And I need to pass in the text reader. So actually I need to change this text reader to a stream reader because text reader is an abstract class. And then I'm going to go ahead and write something out to the console. I'll just say car2.model's fine. And let me build this. Oops, misspelled stream. Now we can run it and take a look at the output. And it says foo. Now what I want to do, let's go back in here, now that we have that XML file. And I'm just going to comment out this stuff that writes it to the file. I need that serializer though. And then I'm going to go ahead and open up the XML file. Notepad, and we'll just put something in here. Let's change the model from foo to bar and save the file back. Now when I run the application, oops, looks like I was trying to close a reader that was never created. Go ahead and run it now. We'll see that it's actually pulling the information out of the XML file. So you see, serialization is actually pretty simple. The key things to remember are you need to use the serializable attribute, and then you're going to need to create an instance of the XML serializer class. You need to pass in the type of the object that you plan to serialize. If you're going to read it, you can create any kind of a if you're going to write it, you can create any kind of a writer. I used a text writer, actually a stream writer. Pass in the file name, create an instance of the object that you're going to serialize, and then you just call the serialize method. And to deserialize, you just do the reverse. Instead of creating a text writer, I created a text reader, and then you just call the deserialize method, passing in the text reader object. So one of the things that I'd like to note, I'm not going to actually illustrate this, if you had a collection class, maybe something that had some kind of internal data structure like an array that contained, a collection of these car classes, as long as you marked that collection class as serializable, it would write out an XML file with as many instances of the car class as you created within that container class.